Hello, everyone. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. This is episode 4. I'm Paige Alexander.
And I'm Jamie Morgan Reno. Good to see you, Paige.
You too.
At Real Food Recovery, our mission is to help empower you to make educated, life-renewing decisions that promote physical and emotional health, longevity, vitality, peace, and wholeness. We are food plan neutral. We are processed food free. And today we have an episode that is a continuation really of the journey through, our episode 3 was all about, how we knew when we hit the bottom, or what our food bottom looked like, food addiction bottom looked like. And the next logical step, we think, is to talk about the day or the period of time that we realized, hey, I'm not just overeating, or I'm not just obsessing about food or thinking about it all the time. Like, I have a body and brain reaction to food that is something that is out of my control.
Mhm.
I am an addict. So Paige, let's start there.
That's such a great, interesting question because I have to tell you, until I was in a recovery program, I don't think I ever even understood that I had an addiction. I didn't know the verbiage, I didn't know the language, I didn't even understand what was happening. I didn't understand why it was happening. And so once and I have to tell you, when I joined this recovery group, let's be real, it was to try and lose weight again. Those last 5 or 10
Yeah,
pesky
those
pounds that
last,
just
yeah,
wouldn't that let's get real. And quite frankly, I think most people that do join the recovery program, even though it's not about weight loss, it can't be about weight loss. It's still about weight loss.
that's what brings them
So
in.
of course it's what brings people in because you're trying the next new shiny thing.
Right.
But what was different about this program that I joined was there's so much emphasis on the science and
Yeah.
explaining to me what's going on. And I was fascinated by that. I finally understood why I was doing what I was doing. But the more I learned, I remember having this light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And I was talking with this person who is an expert in
Mhm.
food addiction recovery. And I said, so wait a second, I'm an addict, right? Am is that a new adjective for me? Am I an addict? And she said, you're not an addict. You have hyperaddicted brain cells in your head that have been there because of the processed food exposure that you've
Mhm.
dealt with.
Yeah,
So,
hijacked.
yeah, it's a part of me. It's not
Yes,
who
it's not
I
who you are.
am. It's just one component of me. It's just some brain cells that I have that I need to address so I
Mhm.
can have a wonderful life. And that was just a very interesting moment. What about you?
No, I love that. And you know what? When you talked about that, that researcher kind of giving you the lay the land around, you are not defined as this word, but you
Mhm.
have parts of your body that react in addictive ways to foods, processed foods that are designed to activate those parts that way, right?
To torture me.
Ex- yeah, but you know what? The way I looked at it was, when I heard that was, not only are you not identifying as an addict, which is helpful, but you're also saying, hey, you know what? My body and brain are acting exactly the way they're supposed to act when they are exposed to hyperpalatable, hypercaloric, hyper-stimulating food.
Yeah,
It's exactly the way it should act.
that you're so smart by saying that because that was the marketer's job. That was the
Right.
engineer's job to
That's
come
right.
in and chemically engineer these foods to the highest bliss point possible by adding salt, oil, and sugar to the
That's right.
point that would literally addict our brain cells without our knowledge and without our permission, and then make it affordable and easily accessible. So the addiction begets the addiction, right? It's progressive.
That's right.
So interesting,
That's
interesting.
absolutely true. And for me, I've talked about it before, and I always had a problem with food. I've always been obese or morbidly obese all of my life, and since I was an infant, unfortunately. And so, it finally in my 30s dawned on me that I used food like an alcoholic or a drug addict, alcohol
Mm.
or drugs. I was using it to self-soothe. I was using it to escape. I was using it to numb. I was using it to not feel. I was using it to distract, to celebrate, to punish. I had become a white knuckled dry drunk around food, which meant, you know, just like an alcoholic who's dry or sober, but not in recovery yet, they'll sort of hold on like a white knuckled grasp on life or on their sobriety. I was the same way. I was trying to, at the time still moderate, because I believe that moderation was the way to go, and moderation is healthy, and everyone should moderate, and there should be no food abstinence in general. That to me felt extreme. But what I didn't realize is that I was living in a very extreme way by extreme emotional responses, extreme mood swings, extreme thoughts, and obsessive compulsive thinking around food and what I could eat and when I could eat and how much calories or what was my macro mix and what was this or that. And it was crazy making.
Oh yeah.
I never wanted to admit I was addicted until I got so tired of having that food monkey on my back. Tired of outrunning my cravings, tired of the outrunning thoughts and obsessions, and just like we talked about in episode 3 about our laxatives, right? Like the laxative advice that you heard, right? And you never know when it's going to hit. The same thing is true. You never know when the cravings would hit. And you talked about that too, like you would be driving along in your car and like, oh my gosh, there's a sugar craving. What do I do now?
Yeah.
Same thing for me. And I realized I was going to have to abstain and stop moderating processed foods. I remember where I was. It was probably like, this is really, maybe just 4 years ago that I was like, I cannot have processed food. And certainly these hyper palatable, straight up desserts and pizzas and flours and sugars and artificial sweeteners and all of that. I grieved like someone had died. And you know what? The funeral was for my best friend. It really was. Food
It's
was
not funny. I don't know why I laughed.
No, but it's true. It sounds silly, but food was my best friend. And I had friends, I had acquaintances, but I didn't really have a best friend because food was always there for me.
Right.
So I never really had to forge a relationship, nor did I really want to. I didn't want anyone having that close access to me.
I can't believe that you use that word grieve, because I have had that same experience too. When I had to give things up, it is a grieving process.
Yeah.
You think about holidays and, your mom's favorite, whatever specialty dish, or things that I would make every year for my family. It's a loss. It's a
Yes.
lot. I cannot understate that. It is a loss, and there is a grieving process that we do go through. And I definitely experienced that as well. And it's kind of a head turner going, whoa, 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 what's going on here? This doesn't even make sense. So it takes a minute to you're like Bambi on ice. You've got to
Yes.
get your feet back under you and go, wait, we gotta
Yes.
talk about this inside here.
Yes.
It's worth it. And these are some of the processes that happen whenever you make changes. Do you ever have user dreams?
Oh, yeah, I do. Actually, it's interesting. Now, when at first I had the user dream and I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I want to go back to that dream, right? I want to go back to eating that food. And I would like, wistfully think about it. And now I have the user dream if I have it maybe a couple times a year.
Yeah.
And of course I want to figure out like, okay, why am I using that food in that dream? But I wake up and now I'm relieved that I
Yeah.
not eat that food. That
Yeah.
food is no longer in my life. I'm like, thank
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, I know. It's like when you show up to school and it's the final exam and you didn't know to study, and you're like,
Didn't
why
notice
didn't
that.
I do that?
Yeah.
Why don't I know my locker combination? It's very upsetting. So
Yeah.
I'm always so grateful when I wake up from that dream and I did not eat whatever I thought I had. And here I'm going to have to go through 3 days of, getting back off of it again. And I just, it's such a danger to me now. The sugar for me is such a dangerous place. It will kill me if I go back there. I just never want to go back to
Yeah.
that dark place. So yeah, that's
Well, one thing that I want to turn the conversation towards is we talked, right, in episode 3 and today even we've talked a lot about the dark side of the addiction, right? The bottoms, the day we knew we were an addict, or the period we knew we were an addict, what the grieving process is like. And I just want to share that for me, in my recovery, once I admitted that these foods were not part of my life, that these foods were not something that I could moderate, that I could live and thrive, a thriving life around, and I wanted to thrive. Once I admitted that my ability to grow and thrive was more important than my ability to have access to these foods, it actually got a lot easier. A lot
Agree.
easier. Once I used to think abstinence was like a prison. It was
R-
hell. It was, oh my gosh, I could never do that. Why would anyone want to live that way? It actually is freedom.
That's amen. That's all I have to say is amen. And the irony to this is, how can you ever know how good it is when you're in the middle, you're in the mire, you're
Yeah.
in the dark abyss? It's hard to understand. Well, first of all, how could I possibly ever get out?
Yeah.
And this is good enough. And whatever it's going to take to get me out, it's going to hurt. But, and so you don't want we do everything we can to avoid the pain, but we realize now on the other side, the joy is so much exponentially
Yes.
worth it to live in this place of peace and freedom. I'm glad you brought that up. So
Absolutely.
there's a couple of interesting things that I've heard around out there. And one of the questions that comes up is, so, we're talking about processed food addiction. Is it any worse than drugs or alcohol or any other
Mm,
addiction? I have had a close association, a person who's closely associated to me who no one knew, but they ended up, they were addicted to drugs. They didn't tell a person and they had to go away to rehab for a month. And we had a long conversation when they were out about the things, I was curious about what are the modalities, what do they do for you?
right.
What do they teach you in there? And it was so
Right.
curious to me that all the things that I have learned in recovery and want to bring here and share are the exact same things that they are teaching to
Right.
people that are coming off drugs and alcohol. It's you've got to fix what's in here. You
Mhm.
you can't just get willpower. That's not it. That's not
No.
recovery. You
No.
got to address the issues.
Well, and the other thing I was thinking about when you mentioned that, this person who was out of that month-long rehab, a lot of times you'll hear some rehab facilities for drug and alcohol will have, some more solid recovery rates than food addiction or processed food recovery, third-party recovery, or inpatient recovery centers.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because the processed food thrives in the home. Processed food addiction thrives in the home. And yes, it's everywhere in the world, right? Processed foods are everywhere. But when the addiction ramps up and it gets to a point where that addict can't stop,
Mm-hmm.
that usually happens in the nighttime eating, the binges at home, the binges after the party, the binges after everyone leaves, the binges after people go to bed, when
Yes.
that addiction ramps up. And unless you have in-home awareness and in-home process to address what's happening, meaning cleaning your environment, having messaging in the home that is positive, a community that you can access from anywhere, right? Content like ours, so education that comes to you from people who have lived through it that you can access
Yeah.
in your home. All of that is why you don't see the recovery rates with inpatient food addiction programs
Mm-hmm.
as well or as high as you see a drug and alcohol addiction
Yeah.
inpatient recovery.
Great point. One of the things you said about, making sure that you're in a clean environment. I love what Chef AJ says. If it's in your house, it's in your mouth.
Oh,
And she's so
absolutely.
right. So
Absolutely.
I do try to keep a clean environment. My husband has one cupboard. I do not go in there unless I'm jonesing for something and I'm
Mhm,
looking for trouble. I do
mhm.
not go in that cupboard, and he understands. And I'm very grateful to him that he is willing to cooperate with a problem that I have by keeping his, I'll call him treats, out of my eye gate. We
Right.
like to protect our eye gate, whether you're
Yes.
at the store or at a restaurant. don't look around
Yep.
and camp out on the other stuff. Just stay in
Mhm.
your lane, lady. What was the other thing I was going to say that was so important? Oh, it's interesting when we compare food addiction to drug and alcohol addiction, we understand that food addiction is the hardest addiction there is because you still have to eat
Yes.
and you're exposed to it on every single corner. There are neon signs of some form. If you go to the
Right.
gas station, it's there. If you go to I I mean, now you might go to, I'm just gonna say Old Navy because that's I saw it there, that they
Mhm.
have
Oh,
candy
yeah.
bars and things at
Oh,
the
yeah.
counter. I'm
All the
like,
grocery,
"Are
all
you
the
serious?"
clothing stores now, it's crazy.
Yes, yes. I mean, every place you go, it's there. So it really takes some resiliency and building up some inner fortitude and the skills to handle these situation. And I love the ability to have a little mantra
Mm,
prepared. You know, some people say, "This is not my food. This is not
mhm.
my food. This is not my food." Some people say that is poison. That is poison.
Yeah,
I I
that's how
I
I said it.
yeah, I love this little thing where you put your hands on your cheeks and you go, "I'm okay." No, it's, "You're okay. You're okay. You're okay." If you're someplace you can't always put your hands on your face, but
True.
you can repeat that, and that helps bring the blood flow back
That's
to
right.
the frontal lobe again.
That's right.
So, I do think food is a tougher one, and oftentimes I know people that get out of drug and alcohol or cigarette, off that, and they do a cross addiction and they come to
Right.
food
Yes.
and
Oh,
gain weight.
I
But
remember I was in, when I realized I was in the processed food addiction recovery, and I was embracing the word addict. I actually spent a lot of time, even though I could care less about alcohol. I could take a sip of an alcoholic beverage and just leave the rest and not even think twice about it. Couldn't care less. But if I took a bite of a brownie, you bet that I was finishing that whole brownie and probably the rest of the
oh,
pan.
I thought you were gonna say the pan.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And if I
I
threw it away, try not to finish it, I would just dig it out of the trash and eat it.
yeah, I never met a brownie I didn't like.
That's right. So for me, I started going to AA meetings, open meetings, speaker
Mm.
meetings usually, and I heard a lot of people talk about how, they had to find different ways to to find their way out, when they were feeling like, okay, they were in all those old behaviors or all those old patterns or around the same people or around that. They had to find new, new ways to move in towards recovery. And I remember thinking like, yeah, like my whole life's gonna have to change. But there would always be these AAers that, old timers as they called themselves, 30, 40 years of recovery. And AA is an anonymous program, and I certainly wouldn't name names, but there were many that you would find a photo of this old timer who you'd listen to these inspiring stories, these inspiring recovery stories. Most of these old timers, right? That these really inspiring AA speakers, circuit speakers, they call them, right? There's a handful of them nationally. They're all obese,
Yeah,
morbidly obese.
yeah. I don't there was some sitcom on, I don't remember the name of it, but it was these women who joined together and met and AA and the part of the sitcom was it took place in the AA meetings. And at the beginning, they're always setting the cookies out
Yeah.
before the meeting and then
Yep.
breaking it down afterwards. So, I mean, you just can't have a gathering without some type of sugar. So, it's interesting. It's interesting. So, yes, I actually think food addiction is worse to have to deal with
Mhm,
long term
mhm.
than the drugs or alcohol. So another question that comes up is whenever you were aware that you had this addiction, does it put you in a position where you are more aware of the others around you who are suffering? Can you pick them out in the crowd now? Can you
Yeah.
see?
Yeah, and it's, I don't really pay that much attention anymore, but at one point I did look a lot,
Hmm.
because it was sort of that identification, like I wanted to know that I wasn't alone, and I started to see like the whole, if you spot it, you got it. So I started to see myself and other people in me,
Hmm.
and I realized, it wasn't about their body shape. that that I thought they were suffering. I could just see their behaviors around food. I could see what was on their plate or in their cart at the grocery store. I could see what they would, how they would act around certain foods or certain meals, or act in social settings, and it taught me a lot of compassion, taught me a lot
Mhm.
of compassion, taught me a lot of, self-compassion eventually, you know, and,
Yeah.
and acceptance of myself.
Yeah, I think when you have been in this and you've suffered so much, you can tell, you see other people suffering, and you're right, it is heartbreaking. So that kind of leads into that next question is, whenever you see others who are obviously suffering, you see their habits and behaviors, do you say anything?
No, no, I really try not to curse, but hell no.
Capital hell no.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Bold, bold type.
That's right. That is their journey. And I say this because I did it. I did it.
Mhm.
I thought I was doing public service that no one asked for. And I brought it to my family and friends. I remember my poor family member, a younger family member. I just adore this child, and I lectured her about, no, and it wasn't about a weight issue or any of that. It was about, you would feel so much better if you ate this way. And I lectured her about her food choices, or I would say, are you sure you want to order that? I mean,
Oh, wow.
oh yeah. And she wouldn't go out with me to a restaurant for years. I don't blame her. I wouldn't have either. She was a younger person, and so unsure, right? Of who's this crazy woman telling me how to eat. And so I had to, and I got the feedback, right, from her mom, like, hey, this isn't working. You can't do that. That really turned her off to you in general.
Yeah.
So all you want to do is just, love this person. And that really hurt my heart when I heard that.
Yeah.
And it was, 5, 6 years ago that I heard it. And of course, since then, I've spent so much time just quietly reminding myself that there are 100 different ways for me to connect with this person or anyone in my family or
Yeah.
friends. And it is not up to me, it's up to God,
Mhm.
journey. And if they have the awareness that I once had, that's between them and God. It's not up to
Mhm.
me to usher them further or faster into the process.
Yeah, I agree with what you said.
Mhm.
When first of all, nobody wants to hear it
Right.
unless they're ready, and if they're
Right.
ready, they're going to come to you and ask about it.
That's right.
Otherwise, you are white noise, and all they're doing is being polite and trying to figure out, how can I get out of this
Right.
conversation? How long is she going to keep going? So, what
Mhm.
I know is the biggest message, the strongest message I can send is just by living a good example.
That's right.
Just walking the walk. My family, they know what I'm doing. It's no secret. And there's no, it's not a secret to anybody that knows you what you're doing. For instance, we just had Easter last weekend, and I'm in charge of the Easter egg hunt every year. And so I refuse to put candy in the Easter eggs.
Mhm.
So I put quarters in the Easter eggs, and then I set up Grandma's Bunny Store afterwards for the grandkids to take their quarters. And I
And
wanted
buy
those.
little treats,
Yeah, yeah. I had
toys, or
slinkies, coloring books, bubbles, colors,
cute.
stuffed animals, books, all those different things that they could buy, and they drive a hard bargain. But I was determined to get those quarters back because
Right.
I need them
You
for
know, for
next
next year.
year.
Yeah.
I mean, it might have cost me $40 in toys, but I needed those quarters back. Um, so yeah, nobody wants to hear it. So just the loudest message you can be is a quiet example, and it makes you more approachable. They'll
Mhm.
come when they're ready. They'll come.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not up to us. And you know what? When God does it instead of a human doing it, it usually sticks. Right. I
Works a
don't
little better, right? When
exactly.
it's their journey. And you hear people talk about whether it's drugs or alcohol or food or whatever it is, they start on this path how many times before it sticks. So
Mhm.
the first time they try it,
Yeah,
it's
it
not
might.
unusual to have a few blips on the
No.
road,
Yeah,
but just our message about that is don't give up. Don't
that's
give
right.
up. It's
Oh,
okay.
I was trying to moderate the processed food for 8 years of my recovery.
Mhm. Yeah,
Eight,
how'd it
8 years.
go?
And then it
How'd
was
that work
probably,
out?
exactly. And then it was probably another 2 years that I started to moderate it again because I'm an addict and I still wanted to not believe that I couldn't moderate.
Hmm. It's so fascinating to hear everybody's story. And what's really fascinating to me is how much work and effort you put in to try and figure out a way to still make this work so I can still have
Right.
everything I want. And so, how many different diets do we go on? How many different gurus do we listen to? How many different strategies we have till we finally go, okay, I'm taking off the gloves. I'm throwing
That's
in the
right.
towel. Maybe I'm going to fly straight and try it this
Right.
way and see if that works.
Mhm.
But I say that by the time people get to recovery, it's the last house on the block. They have literally tried everything else,
Yeah.
whether it be any of those Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, they're just selling processed food in smaller quantities that
That's right.
they're creating in factories too. So it's perpetuating the problem and it's keeping their pipeline full
That's
of
right.
clients. But um, yeah, it's just interesting how strategic that addiction is, and it's not going to go down without a fight. I mean,
No.
it's going to struggle for survival anyway it can.
Oh,
So
that's right. And the minute we think that we're in a safe place from the addiction, so to speak, or the tendencies, that there's an old saying in AA about, your addiction is doing push-ups in the corner while you're in recovery. And it's so true. Like your addiction is always training, laying in wait and training and waiting to come back and figure out how to get a foothold in. It is an
it's scanning
insidious
the room.
process in the
It is
brain.
It is always scanning the room.
Yeah.
And I love that saying about the addiction is always on the sidelines doing push-ups, because what I like to say back to that is it's okay. All you have to be doing on the other sideline is you just have to do one more. You
That's right.
only have to do one more push-up. So
That's right.
get drop down and give me 20,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
keep
Yeah.
keep going.
Keep going.
Don't give
Keep
up.
going. Keep doing the consistency. And we need, we'll have a whole episode on consistency.
Oh
And
yeah.
really, it is not about going all out. It is not about exhaustion or complete pendulum swing. It is really about consistency, little baby steps over time that add up to big changes, guys. It is not some big drastic thing, which is ironic on a show that we're talking about food abstinence on, but it's true. People think that it is extreme, like to go to food abstinence, in processed food abstinence. But there are so many little steps along the way to get there. And there are so many ways to make progress in recovery, given the amount of food cues that are out in our world today that are barraging us 24/7. The minute we wake up to the minute we go to sleep, we are barraged with processed food cues and triggers.
That's not undersaid. That word is accurate. That
Mhm.
accurately describes what it's like, because people are wanting to make money.
That's right.
You have to vote with your fork. Everybody is getting rich
Mm.
off of your demise. So, yeah,
That's right.
disgusting. Well, anything else you want to say about this before we go to our seed questions that
Yeah,
people have?
yeah. Let's talk about some of the viewer questions that we get. I love these
Okay.
questions. If you
Yeah.
guys ever want to submit a question to us, you can do that on our Facebook page on Real Food Recovery. You can do that on our Instagram page, Real Food Recovery 23. And we also have our YouTube that you can certainly post a question in the chat at any point, and we will make sure we incorporate it in a future episode.
Beautiful. Okay, the first one is, I keep hearing about how sleep is so important in food recovery, but I don't get the connection. So you
Mm.
want me to take this, or you want me?
No, you take it.
Okay, so one thing that we know is when you're sleep deprived, your resistance is low. Research says the number one aid in weight loss is sleep. Studies show that a sleep deprived brain have bigger appetites, and the brain, it's a brain's way, it's searching for energy, right? If you're consistently those people that are getting 5 to 6 hours of sleep, it's just not enough. We weren't designed to live off that. 7 to 8, and I even like between 8 and 9 really
Yeah, me too.
restful sleep. But
Me-
when you are low or lacking on sleep, your brain needs energy. And I'm going to be funny here and say the lowest hanging fruit available for that would be, in addition to caffeine, would be some type of food. And let me tell you, whenever the brain is looking for food when it's sleep deprived, it ain't carrot sticks that it's looking
That's
for.
right.
It
That's
is looking for that highly palatable, high sugar, high processed thing.
mhm,
I mean, the brain literally is got binoculars looking and saying, okay, if I can't find it, we have to go get it right now.
that's
So you are really behind the 8 ball whenever you're sleep deprived. So I don't do you agree with that? Do you see it
Oh,
in
absolutely. I was just talking to, I work in the healthcare world, and I was just talking to a senior executive in my company, and this man is there's no doubt, is very successful, really a storied career, and a very kind, humble man. And he was talking about, we were talking about well-being, and some of the changes that we wanted to make in our lives to keep progressing forward. And he said, if there's one thing that I could really do better at sleep, he said, I know how critical food is to my performance and doing the things that I want to do and need to do every day. But he said, especially at work, right? How, when you're at a higher level in the company, your higher performance is expected from you. So he said, I can't perform at that higher level unless I know these foods are out. He said, but the next frontier for me is the sleep. He said, his spouse, she needs 8 to 9 hours. And I saw it
Mhm.
the same way. And
Me too.
I would go 3, 4 hours a night and think I'd be okay, but I wasn't. I was tired all the time. And
Mhm.
now I get to the point where I can't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And he said, I'm really fighting now, just like I did to fight to have really clean, healthy food, which I do because I know it keeps me feeling really good. I'm realizing that sleep is as critical as the food.
Yeah. So we talk a lot in recovery about we do what we do for how we feel after
Mhm.
exercise. We do. I'm not saying you're going to love going, but you're going to feel great after drinking your water, having your food prepared, whatever it is. Sleep falls into that category. We do
Right.
what we do for how we want to feel after. And I don't want to be dragging through the day just
Mhm.
in it's painful. It hurts.
It
I
really,
I need my rest, and quite frankly, I try to carve out a 20-minute timeout, whether I fall into a deep sleep or I am in a position where I just close my eyes. So I call it so I can be prepared for second shift. I
mhm.
do a much better job on second shift if I just put myself in timeout,
That's
close
right.
the brain down,
Non-sleep
close the
rest.
eyes. Sometimes I do, I'll nod off, but just quiet time and I perform much better. So the
Yeah.
answer is yes, it is important.
Yeah.
Enough said on that. Do you have
Yeah.
anything else to say on
Yep.
that?
We can move to the next one.
So the next one is there a season of the year that makes processed food worse? I'm feeling so anxious with summer coming on. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, so we see those ads now, out in magazines and out in the media, getting yourself beach body ready, as they say.
Mhm.
I hate those ads. There is so, I mean, of course, advertising exists. Advertising anywhere in the world
Yeah.
exists because if you're trying to convince someone that they don't have something that they need, right? Or that they need
Yes.
something that they don't have, either way you want.
Yes.
And so, you're essentially saying advertising comes from a place of you, the consumer, are not or never will be enough. So you better do
Right.
things or change your world, change your appearance, perception to others,
Mhm.
so that you can attempt to be enough. And then once you get there, you still won't be enough. We'll sell you something else that you need. So it's really important for me and recovery to say, hey, the season, right? Yeah, I know that summer's coming in the Northeast and North America in general. And yes, there'll be sleeveless things, and yes, there'll be dresses and shorter things and all of that. And I don't really think much about it now, but I remember the years that I was obsessed by it. Like, oh my gosh, I better get in the gym and do 50 more tricep exercises. Or I've got to find that perfect bathing suit cover up because the lower body
Right.
after winter, it was making me crazy. And then I started to realize I go through a natural cycle. I grew up in the Northeast. I lived in the Northeast for many years. I live in the Southwest now. But I'm back up enough and my body is timed. My body naturally every year goes through a cycle where when the weather gets a little colder, even in the Southwest, it gets a little colder, my body will naturally start, no matter what I do, it will naturally start to put on a few pounds, 3, 4 pounds, and it will stay that way until I naturally start to move more in the spring. and then it comes right back off. And then in the fall, when you're inside more and it's dark earlier, it goes right back on, it comes right back off. It's been like that for several years now. And I don't stress about it anymore. I don't like
Nice.
the advertisers try to tell me, oh my gosh, you're not Beachbody ready, or what are you going to do? You've been hiding out in the winter sweaters all year. Whatever. I just keep
Yeah, I love that point that you brought up about basically what the marketers are saying and trying to capitalize and convince you of is you are not good enough.
exactly.
You are not good enough, and you need me to change you so you can fit in on the outside, and then all your problems will be solved.
And we don't play that. And as we learned, if we learned anything from episode 3 about our food bottoms, I had done everything that I thought was required of me from the
Yes.
advertiser's perspective, and I was still just miserable. It's
Yeah.
not true. It's a lie.
Yeah. Homie, don't play that game no more.
That's right.
Mm-mm.
That's
So
right.
yeah, in answer to your question, yes, there are some seasons that obviously can exacerbate something that might be lying dormant,
Yes.
but stay the course is the message. Stay the course. Remember, the value comes from inside. And if there's anybody out there who judges you on your outer appearance, you certainly don't want to be associating with those types of people.
No.
So I think that's all for this episode.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share before we take off?
No, again, we love your questions. So submit those on the Facebook, Instagram, Real Food Recovery, or Real Food Recovery 23 on Insta, and get us in our YouTube channel in the comments. We'd love to hear from you there too. And if there's future topics you want to hear us talk about, we've got over 100
Good point.
years, over 100 years in recovery between Paige and I, because we count our entire lives as being either in addiction or in recovery. So from our perspective, we've got a lot of wisdom to share, and two different, very different perspectives along the continuum of lifestyle. So, and different histories and different lessons learned that we bring to you. So if you've got a question about lifestyle change, about recovery from processed food addiction, and the recovery process in general, right? Because if you're coming from another substance, going to food now, and now you're trying to get out of the food, there's more recovery there for you. There's more onion to peel for you. And we can talk about those topics, because it's, once the food's out, we've got lots of other things to talk about: relationships and self-love and self-acceptance and
Spirituality, exercise,
spirituality,
sleep.
so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much. We're just scratching the surface here.
Yeah. It's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. See you
Thanks.
next time.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.